Who is the strongest character in Team 7? This is a question that at this point in the series has completely changed. Prior to the time skip, there has probably been a dozen of videos being made on who exactly was the strongest. However, the answer to this question right now, at the point that we are at, Boruto chapter 23 of Boruto TBV Vortex, I believe that the answer has changed quite drastically. As before, Team 7 and all their members, they were quite relative to each other, especially if you remove everything karma related. We have seen time after time Boruto and Kawaki fight one another, and they have been shown to be relative. And when it comes to Boruto in comparison to Sarada and Mitsuki, prior to the arc where we ended up meeting Kawaki, we had Boruto, Mitsuki, and Sarada who were fighting one another. And in that fight, Boruto states that he is going all out, and Sarada is able to keep up. And using the ninja tools, she is even capable of beating both Mitsuki and Boruto when they are fighting together against Sarada. This showcases that all of the members in Team 7 were quite relative to each other. And arguments could be made as to who was better, as if you go with the anime interpretation where Mitsuki ends up using Sage Mode, there are more points that could be given to Mitsuki being the strongest. Or if you're simply going with the manga, you would see that Sarada, especially in their fight versus Boro, could be viewed as the strongest, not only due to her being quite smart and being the only one who wasn't affected by Boro's virus initially, calling the shots and bringing everybody back so that they can figure out exactly what Boro was doing. She at that instance could be viewed as the strongest, as with her Chidori, she moved at speed so fast that Boro himself couldn't even react and shift his core. But now that we are in the time skip, especially at this stage where we are reaching the climax of the current arc we're in, I doubt that we're going to see any more power-ups, at least for this arc, unless something crazy happens regarding Momoshiki. So the question now remains, who is the strongest in Team 7? And to answer this question, we will end up going from weakest to strongest. And the first person that we have to put as the weakest person in Team 7 is obviously Mitsuki. And this is something that almost everybody could have predicted when it comes to the series right now, because Mitsuki, although he has done things in the manga thus far and has been quite active, we have to clearly admit that compared to Boruto, Sarada, and Kawaki, he hasn't done enough. Mitsuki's most impressive feats was essentially hitting Ryu and making him cough up blood. Even though he did end up fighting versus Boruto, we can't judge that fight accurately due to the simple fact that Boruto was not trying at all, and there are multiple instances in the fight, and as we saw at the ending of that fight, that Boruto could have even killed Mitsuki, but Boruto chose not to do so, as he wanted to really show to Mitsuki who he truly was, as his one and only son. And if you want to compare him in verse, we clearly know that he is not stronger than Code, and it is even implied by Boruto himself that he is not stronger than Kawaki without his limiters. Whether this is referring to Kawaki with the karma or not, I will go off the interpretation that it is referring to that of with the karma, as Kawaki is the type of person to use the karma whenever he's fighting seriously. So Mitsuki would be weaker than Kawaki using his karma even with the limiters, and I would say that he's approaching that code level or Jigen level of power. I could say that you could place him around those ranges simply due to the fact that he was able to hit and damage Ryu using his Sage Mode. But apart from that, it's quite hard to really rank exactly where Mitsuki would fit with 100%. We just do know that he is not Senju level, he is not Code level, he could be around that Jigen level or Prime Sasuke and Naruto level, but we can't really place him anywhere definitive. Just know that he's below Code. Now the next person that we're going to have to discuss is somebody who I already know is going to cause a bit of controversy, as he is the main character of the series, and that is Boruto. And this may come to a surprise to most of you guys who are watching the video, but if you disagree, make your own comments, make your own community posts, and voice your own propaganda for who you believe is the strongest and your disagreements. I personally am unbiased. Boruto is my favorite character in this series right now, but this is simply where I would place him. What I would say for all the characters that end up coming after him, they are all in the same tier of strength. I would say that they are above code level threats. I believe that all three characters here, especially after Kawaki got his limiters removed and Sarada awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, they are above code level. So they would easily be able to destroy characters like Code, Jigen, Prime Naruto, and Prime Sasuke, in my opinion. So the way that I'm going to be judging who exactly is stronger between each and every one of them is going to be based off what would happen if each and every one of them ended up fighting. And if we start off with a character like Boruto and how he would do versus Sarada, the answer is quite clear. Sarada would absolutely destroy Boruto, and it's really hard for me to even find arguments as to how exactly Boruto could deal with Sarada. And I know some people are not going to like hearing this at all because we know how girls are treated in anime. Most people hate to acknowledge the strength that girl characters have in the series, but I'm not going to do that at all. First of all, when it comes to Sarada, even before she ended up awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, she displayed a feat which was the best speed feat in verse that we have seen anybody do, which was essentially dodging Hidari's Chidori point blank range, a Hidari who is already shown to be relative to Boruto prior to that, as they had a clash of both of their ninjutsu, with Boruto clashing with his Rasengan and Hidari clashing with his Chidori. This clash indicates a relativity due to the fact that one jutsu did not overpower the other, and both jutsus ended up being nullified. We have the same Hidari, who ends up using the claw mark and then spawns right next to Sarada at point blank range, and Sarada, only using her third Tomoe Sharingan, is able to dodge and react to that, a feat that we have really seen nobody else perform. A lot of people could mention that later on in the fight that she is bested by Hidari, and that is clearly true. I'm not saying that 3 Tomoe Sharingan Sarada is capable of beating Hidari at all, but she has displayed some of the best speed feats that we have seen in the series. And this has been something that has been constantly shown throughout the Boruto series in general, how out of all of them, Sarada has consistently been one of the fastest. Not as fast in the past as Sage Mode Mitsuki, but fast enough where when everybody is in their base in Team 7, Sarada is consistently shown to be the fastest. In addition, she is the only character who has defeated a Senju all by herself, and some people might say that, oh, she had help from Mitsuki, Ayara, and Yado. After Ayara basically got his sword stolen, from then on, the fight was really over, and Sarada took on Ryu by herself after she ended up awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, something that cannot be said for Boruto, who needed the help of Sarada to end up setting up his move. And this is where we come to talk about more of Boruto versus Sarada, and the simple answer is that Sarada is too fast for any of Boruto's moves to do much of any damage. One, when it comes to Boruto using the Flying Raijin versus Sarada, you could say that, oh, he's going to use the Flying Raijin versus Sarada, and then Sarada's not going to be able to keep up. However, Sarada dodged Hidari's Chidori using the third Tomoe Sharingan, and why that is important is that before using that, he used the claw mark, which has been told to us prior that it is similar to Minato's Flying Raijin. And what happened? Sarada dodged it. And we already know that the Chidori amps somebody's speed. One could argue that it is the same for the Rasengan, and I'm not going to be one to debate it, but all I'm going to say is that if Sarada could dodge Hidari's Chidori only using the third Tomoe Sharingan, Sarada with the Mangekyo Sharingan would easily be able to dodge any of Boruto's moves using the Flying Raijin. And one thing we could be said too is that Boruto can't use the Flying Raijin versus Sarada due to her Mangekyo Sharingan ability, due to the fact that she can summon these black hole-like orbs and then suck up anything that she wants. So she could theoretically suck up all of the marks that Boruto is using for his Flying Raijin. She could even suck up the sword, which would cause Boruto to not have any way of reaching Sarada and also escaping those gravitational powers. Because that's what a lot of people thought at first. Oh, to dodge the gravity, Boruto is consistently going to use the Flying Raijin and consistently interfere with the gravitational powers that the orbs has, as he is constantly appearing and constantly disappearing. However, with those orbs, she is capable to pick and choose what she wants to be absorbed, and she can pick a Fly Raijin marker to be absorbed, and she can also pick Boruto himself to be absorbed by making the size of the gravitational orb a lot bigger, as we saw she was able to do versus Ryu. Some people will also note that, oh, Sarada has already been shown that her stamina is not the best when she uses the Mangekyo Sharingan. One could argue that, but all I'm going to say is that Sarada, before using the Mangekyo Sharingan, had already spammed a bunch of abilities. We saw her use the Jidori multiple times, saw her use various different sorts of ninjutsu, and then she used the Mangekyo Sharingan and ended up destroying his opponent. So, Sarada could use all those different abilities and her Mangekyo Sharingan, and then I would grant that she would go down. However, the fight wouldn't take that long, just like it did versus Ryu, and that's simply due to the fact that Sarada's hacks are absolutely broken, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how she deals with future opponents that we end up seeing. As with those gravitational powers, she can also fly, which may play a part in negating Boruto's Uzuhiko, as we do know that he has to be on the ground for it to work, and I don't believe that he only has to be on the ground to charge the ability, as Boruto could simply charge an ability and then fly and then take down Hidari, but he made it quite clear that he needed to be on the ground for him to use the Uzuhiko, and we have never been shown, unless I'm wrong, Boruto using the Uzuhiko while flying. Thus, I believe that Boruto has to have his feet on the ground for him not only to gather up the energy, but for him to also activate the jutsu. And one thing I'm going to say is that Boruto in the timescape, although we have seen him get this strong, he is still heavily nerfed in the way that we see that he's not using the shadow clones, and that obviously has to deal with not letting Momoshiki take over, as one of the biggest things and the biggest points about Boruto before the timescape is the fact that Boruto can't let his chakra reach a certain points, as it makes it easier for Momoshiki to take over. And we also know that as an Otsutsuki, Boruto is not using the karma at all, and that's the main way that Otsutsukis are shown to be using their power. So this is obviously a Boruto who is not at his full potential, not using his entire arsenal, and that's simply due to the fact of the limitations that we currently see him being placed upon. And thus, we have a Sarada who would be able to defeat Boruto, and this is a Boruto in base, and this makes quite a lot of sense to me. It is not too much of a surprise that characters like Sarada are able to keep up in one way, shape, or form, especially as her goal is to become the Hokage. So Sarada has to reach a point where she is acknowledged as either the strongest or one of the strongest in the village, and her other abilities end up making up for where she lacks. And that's why Sarada is personally my second. Sarada is the second strongest in Team 7. And now, the reason why I don't put Sarada over Kawaki is that Kawaki is absolutely the strongest right now. And it could be argued that even without the karma, he would still be able to beat Sarada. We saw that Kawaki is relative to Boruto in base, and with his Kokugan, there simply is nothing that Sarada's most broken abilities can do. Not only could it be argued that with the karma, he's able to absorb it, but it also would be 100% definitive, in my opinion, that Kawaki is able to shrink the abilities of Sarada's, meaning she is able to shrink the orbs to a point where they have little to no gravitational powers, in the sense that we have a Sarada who is capable of bringing up these orbs, but we're clearly seeing that the gravitational powers of these orbs is dependent on their size, in the sense that the larger the orbs are, the more effect they have on somebody. For Ryu to be absorbed, we solely saw that the orbs became bigger, and due to them becoming bigger, we had a Ryu who was thus affected and thus destroyed. So the bigger the size of the orb, the more effective and the more gravitational powers it yields. And thus, with Kawaki shrinking it, he will reduce the gravitational power that the orbs can yield to a point where they basically have no effect. And thus, Sarada's most broken ability will be patched. And I'm not going going to say that I know what the second Mangekyo Sharingan ability is. I have no idea of what it is, but for Kawaki and base to be relative to a Boruto, if he uses the karma, it's going to be an exponential level increase, as the karma has been stated to exponentially increase both power and speed. And thus, if Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan ability is not capable of working, and Kawaki can use the karma and have an exponential increase in power, plus the fact that we have in version 2 karma, he can tap into Ishiki's abilities and battle experience. Thus, it just proves the point even more that the one who stands at the top of Team 7 is actually Kawaki. And Kawaki being stronger and being the strongest in the village at this current moment is something that makes quite a bit of sense and ends up proving his path to be wrong. How the Otsutsuki way of growing will always outscale that of a ninja. And in my personal opinion, it is true, the ninjas always go down this route of training and slowly activating those powers. However, with the Otsutsukis, they are going down the most effective way of gaining power. And that's why Kawaki gaining his power right now is him tapping into this Jigen path. And that's why he is having the staff and resembling the Jigen that we saw in the past. As Kawaki has stated, although he hates Jigen / Isiki so much, he has to admit that his way of doing things is actually correct and effective in achieving what you desire. Not necessarily correct in following the shinobi way, but achieving your goals and what you desire, it is always effective to follow that of what Jigen has taught him. And if you disagree with anything that I've shown, I've tried to be the most unbiased possible. I really was looking for any reason to put Boruto first, but I simply could not, and thus we have a Boruto who is third. You have any other problems? Push out your own agendas out there in the community posts and in the comments. Whatever you believe to be true, I will end up giving my opinion, and if I miss anything critical in this video, make sure to let me know. But as I believe, my point still stands. Kawaki is the strongest, and we're seeing the strongest of the good sides technically at this moment fight the strongest of the other side, being Jura and Kawaki. But could we end up seeing the interference of somebody we wish and love? And that is Momoshiki. And will it end up changing the power dynamics that we currently have in Team 7 if we account for Momoshiki? That is an interesting conversation. And to figure out more about it, make sure to watch this video right here.